If you recently applied to internal medicine training and you did not get an interview, and you're wondering, what should I do next so I'm better prepared for November 2026, then you're in the right place. My name is Luca, I'm a cardiology registrar, currently doing a PhD in the University of Oxford. And over the last 5 years, I've been working really hard to guide you through the training system and how to approach this. Last year, we founded MedHer Consultants, a platform designed to mentor you and guide you through this process. As I always say, when you have a planned layout, it's really easy to go from point A to point B. In today's video, we're going to look at how to approach the next 10 months and what things are feasible to do and what things you might want to just ignore for now. One of the biggest questions I get very often is, I have very limited time. I'm juggling between on-calls, ward cover, ward jobs and whatnot. How can I make the best of the next 10 months? And hopefully, this time around, be better positioned to apply for internal medicine training. And let's face it, if you really want to do this long term, that means going into internal medicine training and then eventually going to higher specialty training, you're gonna have to put in the work. And we can obviously talk about the elephant in the room and how there is bottlenecks and whatnot, but that might not change anytime soon. So we need to adapt. That means we need to do what we can with what we have and make the best of it while things improve. So that being said, let's just dive into what the self-assessment is looking at and then some practical tips on how to approach this in the next 10 months. Now, there's going to be two big cohorts of applicants. The ones that just want to do internal medicine and then higher specialty training within the field, or people that are not quite sure, so they apply to internal medicine and also apply to other specialties. The good thing is that if you're really certain about what you want to do long term, you get 5 marks on top of people that don't just apply to internal medicine. Now, there is no real practical advice here that you can follow. What I would say is, if you're really certain that what you want to do is internal medicine long term, just apply to that. Don't apply to other specialties just because you're afraid of being out of a job. Those 5 marks could be the difference between getting an interview or not, depending on what you have in your self-assessment. The second thing that they'll see during the self-assessment is your postgrad degrees. Now, this is very tricky because if you think about it, you get full marks if you do an MD or a PhD. Now, the chances of you having a PhD before applying to internal medicine are very low, unless you've done some fancy degree before going into foundation program. But if I was you, at this point, what I would do is I would aim to do a degree, one, that it's interesting to me, that means something I'm gonna have fun doing, not something that I'm gonna feel like it's additional effort. Although it's gonna be additional effort, if you think about it, if you do something you're interested, it's gonna feel okay, it's gonna feel fun. One of the things that I did do internal medicine training is that I did a master's in medical education, and I really enjoy medical education. So for me, it was fun to go back from work and then go through some lectures and read some papers and whatnot. Now, doing an MD and PhD will take too much time, so we need to focus on things that are more reasonable within the time frame that we have available. For example, a master's, if you do it full time, is a year. In that case, I would aim for something like a PG Cert or a PG diploma, because a PG Cert is usually 3 months if you do it full time or 6 months if you do it part time. Now, this also means you'll have to pay for it, so make sure you go for a university that is within your budget and also a topic that you really like. I personally tend to advise people, especially if you want to pursue a career in medical education alongside your clinical work, doing a PG Cert in medical education is always useful. Although you can't really claim it in the postgraduate degrees, you can claim 3 marks in training and teaching, which I think overall still puts you at a very good position. Now, as we continue looking at the self-assessment, we can also see presentations. That's usually going to be either an oral presentation, a poster presentation. What's really going to matter is at what level you present it, whether this was international, national, regional or local. Let's put it this way, if you want the highest marking, you want to do an oral presentation at a national international conference where you were the first author. Although this might feel impossible, it's really not. You'll be surprised of how many case reports you've came across during your clinical practice, but you've never really thought about presenting them at a conference. What I would advise is start looking around on your day-to-day job and try to find a case that you find interesting. Remember, a case report does not need to be something really rare. Sometimes you just need to be something that created learning in your practice, and that sharing that case report will improve someone else's practice somewhere. So just keep your eyes open and you'll be surprised of the case reports you can actually find. When you're very junior, you don't know how to do certain things, I always try to find a mentor. That means whether it's a registrar or a consultant, they're keen to teach, keen to give you support. You don't really need a senior to be a co-author for you to submit an abstract about case report. This is very key, but I will always run the abstract by someone that has some level of seniority, because that will help you improve the content of the case report and how it's being presented. Now, most of the conference happen in summer, which means that now is the time where most of the submission deadlines are going to be closing. So this is the time to start submitting. And creating an abstract for a case report is not really hard. There's a lot of videos where you can learn how to do it. Now, the highest mark you can get is 6, which would mean an oral presentation. Now, the chances of getting a case report as an oral presentation is really rare. It doesn't really matter, because if you present a poster at a conference where you are first or second author, you will get 4 out of 6 marks. And this already puts you at a good advantage from the cohort of applicants. This brings me to publications. Now, publications tend to be very challenging to get. Regardless of this, and taking the case report as an example, you can try to find case reports that you find interesting. And then you can write the case report itself. Again, there's lots of videos on YouTube where you can learn how to do that. Same to the abstract for a conference. I will always recommend working with senior people that are keen to teach or to do some research. The reason being because sometimes if you're presenting a case report to a journal, for example in internal medicine, and you're very junior, you might need that sort of backup in the sense that you might need someone with a little bit more of experience in the topic in order to guide you on how to present the case. It does not mean that on your own you won't be able to get it published. It just creates a greater possibility of it being rejected. Which brings me to the journal itself. Now, one of the things I always tell people is that when you're very junior and you're focusing on doing research, most of the times you won't be able to publish in big journals. Sometimes because the article processing cost is quite high, you might not be able to pay for it, or they might have a very low acceptance rate. And for the purpose of you applying for internal medicine, what you need to have, and realistically in the next 10 months something that is possible, you either do 2 case reports, which will get you 5 out of 8, which is the highest you can get in publications, or you can work on a systematic review and that will get you 8 out of 8. The beauty is if you work on a systematic review, and let's say you're not the first author, you become a co-author of this project, you usually will get 6 marks out of 8 because systematic reviews are considered original research. Now, doing systematic reviews is not straightforward, and most of the times you need people with experience, so I wouldn't jump straight to that if you have no experience in research. If you do, by all means, go get yourself a systematic review done. Now, picking the journal, it's always very tricky, because some journals might look very attractive, might look very good, but realistically they're very hard to get something published in, especially whether it's because of the cost. And one of the things you'll see in academia is that the APC, or the article processing costs, can be very high, from like £500 all the way to 3k. That kind of money doesn't grow on trees. So try to find a journal that's likely to take your case report and then just submit. Worst case scenario, they say no, and just keep looking until you find one. One of the things you should always look into is how long does the decision period take. What that means is once you submit, how long does it take for you to get an answer? Because if that's going to take a year, then by all means that's not the journal to go to. The next thing they look at is your teaching experience. Now, you can get either 5 marks if you've organized a teaching program that's lasted 3 or more months, or you can get 3 marks if you're regularly taught for 3 months or more. Now, I think one of the biggest challenges most trainees face when it comes to teaching is actually getting signed off, because you'll be surprised at how much experience in teaching you might have. You just haven't really thought about it. But in order to get the 5 marks, you need to be organized. And one of the things you need to know is that this does not need to be a university level program. It just needs to be something that shows leadership in medical education to the point that you don't just teach, you organize other people to come and teach in your program. Now in 10 months, it might sound like it's straightforward. Just think about 3 months. That means you'll still have about 7 months left to do no teaching at all. Obviously that's not always the case. It might take a bit longer to set up, especially if you have rotations. But what I would do is, I would first of all talk to people in my department and see if there is any way I can organize or help organize the teaching series for that department. That's one way of doing it. What I would do is I would think about something I'm really passionate about. Then I would aim to create a program on my own with other colleagues in order to provide that teaching. Which brings me to training in teaching. Now training in teaching is slightly more difficult. As I said before, you can either do a PG diploma or certificate in medical education. That will definitely get you 3 marks in this section. Only issues you can't really claim for the postgrad degrees. One of the things I always tell people, forget about the postgrad degrees and just focus on everything else, which is, I think, in my opinion, the most realistic thing to do. But in this section, you got 2 options. You either do a postgrad certificate and you get 3 marks, or you just do a train the trainer day, which gives you 1 mark. And if you're interested, I run a train the trainer day every month, and I tend to focus on medical education theories and how they're applied to clinical teaching. So I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy it, because you get lots of tips on how to teach to large groups, small groups, bedside teaching and case-based discussions. So if you're interested, I'll leave the link down below. Finally, you go into your QIP. Now you get 4 marks if you've been involved in 2 cycles of a QIP or audit. Doing QIPs and audits, realistically, is not that difficult. Sometimes it's just about data collection, interpreting that data, and then trying to see if you can do an educational intervention of some sort, trying to improve that. If I was you and I was just starting tomorrow, what I would do is I would try to find a topic that I'm interested in. And one of the things you probably noticed throughout the videos, I always tell people, try to find things you're interested in. Don't do a research on something you don't really like, because trust me, it's going to get boring and you're going to hate it. Same happens with teaching, same thing happens with QIPs, and the list goes on. So in that sense, what you need to do is to try to find something along the lines of the future specialty you want to do. And you'll be surprised, it doesn't matter if you're not rotating in that specialty. If you go and approach a consultant or a registrar and just say, look, I want to do a QIP because I want to pursue this career long term, trust me, they'll be very happy to help you, to guide you. Most of the times they might be too busy to actually work with you, but they'll definitely guide you in the right direction. So if I was sitting where you're sitting and thinking, how am I going to approach this next 10 months before I reapply for internal medicine? I would do the following. First of all, I would sit down and just look at my CV and see the things I'm missing. Then take out the things that I already have. That's fine, that's all sorted, and then focus on the things that I don't have. But one of the things you learned is that most of the things you do for internal medicine training, you can then claim in your self-assessment for higher specialty training. So you're already working ahead of time for that higher specialty training application. So it's worth it at the end of the day. After looking at my CV and look at the things I already have, then I would just create a timetable of how I'm going to tackle each of these projects that I want to pursue. One of the most pressing ones I would say is go and find yourself a case report to submit an abstract to a conference, because most deadlines are in January or Feb. So it's a good time to go and submit those abstracts. Second, I would then find a second case report and then I'll start drafting both of them and get involved other colleagues or other senior colleagues. And this is where you need to start working in teams. Now, everyone's working in teams. Don't think you need to do this on your own. When you have 2 case reports, if you're, let's say you have a group of friends that they didn't get an interview and you're applying for internal medicine training later this year, if you all have the same case report which represents 5 marks, you don't need to be the first author to get those 5 marks. You just need to be a co-author to get 5 marks if you have 2 or more case reports. So you working together will make you stronger. Once I have the abstract accepted for a conference and working on the case reports to publish, then I already have 2 of the self-assessment, sort of aiming to the highest marks I can get. On top of that, I start working with my department trying to see if I can get a QAP or some teaching done. Those 2 things will take slightly longer to happen. but regardless of it, it's something you can start working on right now. And finally, whether you do a certificate or not, I would encourage you to at least do the trainer if you haven't done one. And I know probably you're thinking, I don't know if I can do it. And a lot of people might be thinking, well, it sounds easy, but it's not that easy. And no, it's not, it's really not. But it doesn't matter. That's the way the system is currently. So we just need to make sure we adapt and we overcome. So for the next 10 months, you got this. Go get yourself sorted. And then later this year, if you do apply and you get an interview, which I'm sure that if you follow those tips, you will get an interview. We have mock interviews available that you can definitely book. We have a one-to-one sessions that last 2 hours where we'll go through your 2-minute introduction, how you approach the suitability for IMT questions, your ethics and your clinical scenario. We give you tips on how to improve your communication, your non-verbal communication, and how to leave a mark in the interview. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, by all means leave it in the comments. Don't forget to share with your friends, like and subscribe.